Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this review. We're going to take a look at this week's episode of Top Chef. Hopefully, I'm going to do each of these every week. Uh, what we've got, just basically because it's something I've always had an interest in. Just kind of an additional kind of piece that we'll review. Didn't do them. Hopefully, every week we'll do them on either Thursday or Friday. I had eye surgery on Friday. I got LASIK, so new face, so new season. So we're gonna work with that. So that's why. So hopefully Thursdays and Fridays, but this week we got a little later just because we had to do some eye recovery. So we're gonna start by taking a look at season 21, episode 1. So we got a brand new season, new shit for this year. We're going to be in a new location. They're in a new location this year. They're going to be in Wisconsin, mainly Milwaukee, a little bit in Madison. They might venture out into some other places, but that's going to be kind of where things are going to be located at this year. If you are a fan of Top Chef, you will know that they've got a new host. If you're not, this season will be won't be any different for you, but you will hear them make mention of it. This season they have a new host, Kristen Kish. She was actually the season 10 winner of Top Chef. You may have seen her on other things like Fast Foodies and Restaurants at the End of the World. For the previous 19 seasons, it has been Padma Lakshmi as the host on there. The very first season, actually season 1, Padma was actually not the host. It was actually Kathy Lee Beagle from Food Network's show, The Kitchen. That's where she was on. She was also the ex-wife of Billy Joel. Fun fact with that. But Kristen has actually taken over this season. Everybody seems to like kind of the dynamic that she has with her. Tom Colicchio, who is a famous New York City chef, and Gail Simmons, who is a famous food writer. So they're kind of your main triumvirate, your main judges. If you haven't seen this show before, then basically from there, what happens is there's usually a guest judge every week, usually somebody from the locale of where they're at. This week, it was the owners of the restaurant that they were actually working in. Sometimes it's a specialist in the type of cuisine that they're asking them to make. So there's usually kind of a guest judge, and then the three main judges that are there kind of week in and week out. So typically in the past 20 seasons, the way that this has worked is generally there is a quick fire challenge. What they call a quick fire challenge is basically kind of an introductory challenge that gives you an advantage in the main challenge. Typically that advantage has been what they call immunity, where you cannot be sent home. You cannot lose in the main challenge. This year they changed that. Now, when you get your immunity, you get the immunity as part of the main challenge, and then that immunity extends to the next episode. Because what happened a lot during the way that they've done it for kind of the past 20 seasons is you kind of win the quickfire challenge, and then you're kind of set for that episode, and everybody kind of always plays it safe. During that, they usually do it one of two ways. They either play it super safe, and they make something kind of creative and not really kind of creative, just so that they can kind of skate by, and so because they know they're gonna pass either way, or they do something so wild and crazy that they would typically get sent home because it's like way too far out of the box, but they want to kind of experiment with something, want to kind of see how they push something, and so they want to have to do that without being encumbered about worrying about the fact that they're going to get sent home. So that's usually kind of the way that it works. By actually pushing this back to the next episode, actually changes the strategy a little bit. We'll see kind of how that plays out. Like I said, it's kind of a new thing this year with that. Because it's the first episode, they actually didn't, and then this is another change. They actually didn't do a quick fire in this first episode this year. Basically, they told them, here's going to be your challenge. And then basically they kind of sent them off to kind of get to know each other and allowed the audience to kind of get to know the chefs a little bit. Typically, there are, I think, I think there are 20 chefs, and it plays out over usually 15 or 16 episodes. Is usually kind of the way that it works. It kind of whittles down. And sometimes there's a double elimination in there. Is kind of the way that it works. So we get to they kind of introduce the chefs you see them kind of casually talking in kind of a bar restaurant situation. They're kind of sitting around, kind of introducing themselves to each other. And that's kind of our introduction. We'll kind of cards on the table. I have a hard time learning these people's names. I will usually end up giving them some type of funny nickname to kind of keep them kind of straight in my own head as we go through here. So we'll kind of see how this goes. I'll do my best to try and Wikipedia these people's names ahead of time, and at least kind of let you know kind of who won for the winners and losers, those types of things. So basically what they were challenged with for this is basically, so one of the big things in Top Chef is when they put you in teams, you draw knives. So basically they have a knife block with a bunch of knives representing each of the chefs. And then on the taped around the knife is how you get divided into a team. This week they broke them up in based upon the 3 chefs. Based upon the 3 chefs, then they each had to cook a specific type of thing. And that was basically the challenge, was you had to prepare, based upon what that particular host or that particular judge is asking you to do. So they broke them out into 3 groups. So Gail asked them to make a stuffed pasta. And they could make that whatever they wanted, but basically as long as it was a stuffed pasta, that's what they were after. Kristen asked them to make a soup, and her thing was that soup sounds simple, but it's very complex. You have to build the broth, you have to build the flavors, you have all of these other kind of pieces that go with it. So it's not, obviously we're not just opening a can of chicken noodle soup, they're making stuff from scratch. So to be able to do that, shows kind of, they're looking to see kind of assess kind of day one kind of skill levels. And then Tom asked them to roast a perfect chicken and then serve them a piece of white and dark meat as part of that. Jumping back to the introductions, they were kind of introducing themselves. They would ask them, how many of you are James Beard nominees? How many of you have worked in Michelin star restaurants? There was a couple of folks that didn't have either. And Kristen actually makes the points to them that once you get in the Top Chef kitchen, all those accolades don't matter. It's only what happens there. So nobody has any more advantage or less advantage than anybody else. You're there to cook as best as you can. If you succeed, you move on. If you don't, you go home. Is basically the way the game is played. That said, there was a guy there wearing a hat. I've dubbed him Hat Guy. Tom Colicchio, the head judge, likes to wear hats. You'll see him wear hats throughout the season. It's kind of a fashion thing. Part of that is kind of fashion as well, with these shows of kind of what people are wearing. Tom sometimes wears a hat at the judging table. This guy was saying that he had a better hat game than Tom, and Tom's like, well, we'll see. So we'll see kind of how that plays out. So again, they were divided up into 3 groups. Each group then went off to, generally they go to Whole Foods at one of these major places. Whole Foods is one of their sponsors, so they get to go to the restaurant or go to that grocery store. They usually get a budget of X number of dollars. This time I think it was like $200 to make their dish. They have to make X number of courses for them, obviously for the 3 main judges, usually the guest judge, and then depending upon the challenge, they may have to make more or less of than this. For this particular, there was 2 guest judges because they were co-owners of the restaurant. Sometimes they're asked to serve a whole restaurant full of people, and they have to make like 300 servings of a thing. So again, that budget will kind of go up and down depending upon the challenge. But because this is kind of a small one, they're basically asked to make, enough for the judges plus 1 for what's called kind of the showpiece where the photos are taken of it. So that's usually kind of what we're looking at in terms of those. So they all go to Whole Foods. That's usually where you kind of see a lot of people scrambling around asking for, looking for different stuff, those types of things. There's usually chaos ensues. Sometimes there'll be people who are, that's where kind of some of the drama comes in. Oh, this person stole my turnips or whatever, so you'll have to get some of those kind of things as well with that. So this week, pretty tame because, again, kind of first week, nobody's really kind of jockeying for anything. There's no kind of allegiances or hatred kind of set up yet. So everybody's just kind of just grabbing their own groceries. Very kind of tame kind of first episode, to be quite frank with that. So I'll go back to the kitchen. They prepare all of their stuff. Really no kind of drama there. Sometimes you'll see some of the drama as well. People drop stuff, knock things over. They don't make things on time. They don't make the time crunch. Sometimes you do forget things. We'll see that play out here a little bit later. But basically, there's a lot of kind of shit can go wrong, is basically what I'm trying to say. And you see some of that. What was nice about this one, this is another kind of change that generally doesn't happen in previous seasons, was the judges were there actually watching them cook. They could actually see them kind of from where they were stationed at. So they could actually see them when things went sideways. A lot of times in past seasons, the chefs aren't, or the judges aren't there watching them. They're kind of, they're not in the kitchen. So if something goes sideways, they're usually not aware of it. Now, I don't know if that's a change, if that was just because of the way that this restaurant was set up, or if that's a change that's going to be here for this season. But when they've done that in the past, I like that because it gives the judges a really kind of idea of what's really kind of happened going into that serving, whether they had to pivot, whether something didn't work out, whether they burned something. There's so many things that can go wrong along the way, that them having the idea of kind of what's happening in real time. I like that idea rather than just a blind of, here's a food I made. It's not anything close to what I was originally going to do, but you don't know that. So, I kind of like it going like this. Okay, so again, courses were served basically in terms of Gail goes first with her stuffed pastas, and again they're broken up by groups. Then Kristen's group was served next with the soup, and then Tom's went last in there. So the winner ended up being for Gail's pasta her name was Michelle. She is actually a barbecue pit master, so she automatically becomes my favorite person in this season. Typically, a lot of these chefs, they're your typical fine dining chefs. They work in the fancy restaurants, and they've got all these awards and great culinary backgrounds. So it's always fun to see when folks who aren't kind of those people kind of come in and see what they can do. He actually struggled getting her pasta pulled together. And she actually said she hadn't made fresh pasta in years, and she ends up winning the whole damn thing. So she's somebody I'm going to keep my eye on. Funnily enough, the guy who ends up losing that stuffed pasta challenge is actually Hat Guy. His name is David. He actually ends up losing that challenge. Basically, he tried to stuff a gnocchi, which was kind of hard to start with. And he had a bunch of little dots on the plate, really foo-foo, very fancy kind of stuff. They're either like, that's not, they clearly didn't like it. He clearly didn't put a lot of effort into it. He was trying to coast by and get into something that was more kind of his speed. And that's not the way this game is played. You kind of have to go kind of all out if you want to win this, because if you take a week off there, it's going to reflect it. Moving on to the soups. The winner was Manny. He made a green pozole. Looked really good. Again, with all this stuff, obviously nobody's tasting any, nobody at home is tasting anything, so you can only kind of go by their reactions in there. And the loser was a lady named Amanda. I don't remember what she made, but obviously she was at the end. In the final section with Tom's chicken, the winner his name was Danny. He is actually struggling to get his chicken cooked. So for him to actually end up winning the thing was kind of fun to watch, because he was down to like his last 15 minutes and it still wasn't, the chicken still wasn't cooking. So he shoved it in like a super hot oven to kind of get it finished off, to get it cooked kind of perfectly. So, and then the loser of that particular end of that particular round or that particular grouping was a guy named Kenny, and he lost basically, like I mentioned before. He didn't get his dark meat on the plate, but sometimes that happens. It's not an immediate kind of fail. You don't immediately kind of lose if you don't get something on a plate. That was one of my gripes with season 19, was there's a lady who made it all the way to the finals, and week after week after week, she failed to get things on a plate. And it's like, at some point, your time management skills suck and you should be going home. But that's a gripe for a prior season. But this guy didn't get it on. It's not necessarily an immediate cut, but for this particular group in this particular scenario, he did end up on what they call on the bottom. So generally the way that it works is then you kind of have your highs and your lows. So they'll usually start with the main group, the winning group. So out of the three that won, so Michelle with her ravioli, Manny with his pozole, and Danny with his chicken. They picked Danny. They thought that pozole soup was the best of kind of everything that they ate today. So that's how they kind of choose their overall winner. and that he gets immunity in the next episode. The bottom three then, they squared off. Now, typically, usually what happens is in the bottom three or the bottom grouping is then they just kind of select somebody and they send them home. Padma had a fancy line or a famous line that said, "Pack your knives and go." I don't think I heard Kristen use it. I don't know if she's going to have her own or if they're just going to be like, "You're out." But for this particular episode, they basically said, because it's week one, we're going to go ahead and basically have you guys kind of face off against each other. Cook us a great plate of food using with whatever leftover ingredients that you can find there in the kitchen. And that's basically kind of what they were tasked to do. So the three people on the bottom, they went off, they went and grabbed stuff, they all made things. Our hat guy was the one who got eliminated. His name was David. He got eliminated. Basically, again, he was just kind of throwing stuff together. He didn't have a plan. And basically just kind of wasn't thinking it through. And then the other two were basically safe and they get to move on to next week. Now, if you haven't seen Top Chef before, one of the things that they've added in the last, I don't even know how many seasons, it's been around for a little while, but it wasn't there from day one, is what they call Last Chance Kitchen. And basically, once you're eliminated, you get put into kind of this subset over here on the side. And then it's kind of its own kind of sidebar competition. And then at basically the halfway point, and then when there's like 3 episodes left, then they will bring back a chef. So basically you can fight your way back into the competition. But basically it's a mano-a-mano type situation where you have to beat the person who is reigning. So they go head to head. You go in there, they say, "Hey, we're going to make this thing," usually based upon the theme of the main competition of that week. You go in there head to head. There's a winner and a loser, usually judged by Tom. And he says, "You stay, you go." If you go, you're completely out of the competition. You can't get back in. If you win, then again, you keep on advancing. And then, like I said, there's usually 2 entry points that you can come back in, like I said, halfway in kind of the last couple of episodes. So that's usually the way the format will play out. So that's what we're looking at. Overall, kind of a basic level or basic kind of episode of Top Chef this week. No real kind of crazy drama, nothing that way. In seasons past, they used to kind of really play up the drama. They don't really do that as much anymore. So they're really kind of focused on the food now. It provides enough drama itself. So we'll see kind of where things go from here, but it looks to be an interesting season. Obviously here in the Midwest, always gets a little extra attention from me just because they're here. They haven't been in the Midwest, I think they said, since like 2009 when they did a show when they did a season in Chicago. But that was a long, long time ago. So for them to be back here in the Midwest, seeing kind of, highlighting all of the stuff that you will have in Wisconsin is always nice in there as well. So we will be back. Hopefully I'll be back on either Thursday afternoon or Friday. We'll kind of recap the next week's episode and we'll kind of go from there. So other than that, we will talk to you guys later. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure you like and subscribe. You can follow me on Facebook and on Threads if you wish. Other than that, we will see you guys next week.